Okay, I'm Erin Somerville at McCallum High School, now going into the Electoral College in more details. So when we talk about the Electoral College, you know, we have it laid out in the Constitution and clarified in the 12th Amendment. So there's a lot of formalities. There's actually a great deal of pomp and circumstance to the process that is still there because it has not been changed by any sort of constitutional amendment. And so those are the rules. So the formalities, that I'm going to go through them on the left. But for you as someone in the 21st century trying to grasp politics, I'm going to have the actualities on the right. So kind of the lenses that you see the election through. But you're still going to have to be aware of those formalities because they still bind us in a number of ways. So that's what I'm going to try to lay out right here. So remember how I said in the previous lecture that there are 51 elections in the state, all on the same first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. A lot goes into the process before November 2nd. So here's the first important formality, is in every state, each party selects their electors to be ready to go. So in Texas, the Republican Party will pick 38 people called electors, and the Democratic Party as well in Texas will pick 38 electors. So we really have two teams from each party. And then if the party wins, it's those 38 electors that get to go on to the Electoral College. So when they win, we know that first Tuesday in November. So on Election Day, when you go vote, sure, you'll look at candidates and pick their names, but in actuality, you're voting for the party. And then the popular vote is tallied. And in Texas in 2012, when the popular vote was tallied, we saw more people voted for the Republican Party, Mitt Romney, than Barack Obama. So the Democratic Party told its slate of electors, its 38 electors, thank you for your time. You may go home. And the Republican Party said, aha, you are going to get to go on to the Electoral College. So that's kind of how it goes. Now, those electors in the state of Texas, they're supposed to all go vote for the Republican Party. That's kind of their pledge. Now, they actually cast their ballot in the middle of December. So that's the part that's very strange because we'll know well before then who is the next president. But we still have electors from every state. They're going to cast their ballot in the middle of December. And this is a reflection of, maybe the times. 19th century technology did not afford very fast communication in this process. So there was time given, maybe more than we need today. And then in January, those votes that they cast in the middle of December, in January, those are counted. So what happens is in the House of Representatives, that's the actual place where they open up the 538 ballots. So in January in the House of Representatives, they'll get the box of ballots and they'll count the electors' votes, even though we kind of know how this is going to play out. Now, the president has his running mate, the vice presidential candidate. And when you vote for, let's say, Romney, Ryan in 2012, you're casting, sort of two ballots. And these electors are also casting two ballots. So the vice president's ballots are counted in the Senate. So the House counts the 538 electoral votes, and then the Senate counts the 538 electoral votes for the president. So that's the pomp and circumstance. We don't really see that. Here's what you see. You go vote on Election Day. Then you go home, you watch the news, polling places report their numbers, and usually by the next day we can do the math. We can figure out popular vote in Texas went Republican, they get 38 votes, and we just do the tally until one of the candidates hits 270. So maybe you can already see that there's a little problem here. We can automatically assume the vote, but those electors are still free to vote however. Depending on what state they're from, there might be some punishment for defecting, for voting someone else. Nevertheless, they generally do what they're supposed to do, and it has happened in history. number of times. I think well over 70 times electors have defected. We call them faithless electors, and they voted the other way. But it's never swayed an election. It's never been like, we predict the election and then in January we open it up and, oh my gosh, it's a completely different outcome. Oh. So pause now and watch this link, CGP Gray's link, and then come back. Okay. So Nebraska and Maine are the two states that don't do the winner-take-all. They do something different. And I want to discuss that something different. It's called the district method. So Nebraska and Maine have come up with a different way other than the winner-take-all system. Maine did it first in 1972. I'm sorry, Nebraska did it first in, no, it was Maine. 1972, Nebraska in 96. And so what they do is the district method or the congressional district method. Remember, the number you have comes from your representation in the House and Senate combined. So what you could do then is, for every district, give one electoral vote. And then the remaining two would be by statewide popular vote. So in these two states, the state is drawn into the district, so each district gets one electoral vote. And then and you use the congressional districts, and then you add in by statewide popular vote the remaining two votes. Now, up until 2008, interesting tidbit here is Nebraska and Maine have done all this system to figure out how to elect, assuming that it would break up electoral votes. But up until 2008, in every election in both states, you ended up with all the electoral votes going anyway to a candidate. So this method hasn't really taken off. We haven't seen a bunch of states follow suit. Maybe it was thought that states would follow suit. Many Americans don't like the winner-take-all system, and the district method provides a way in which you could break up the electoral votes. But historically, they haven't actually broken up electoral votes. Now, why might that be? Pause here and think about what could be some flaws with the district method. A problem would be gerrymandering, that if you are going with making more lines, that system could be subject to gerrymandering, to lines being drawn in an unfair way that gives an advantage to one party. And the institution in charge with drawing those lines is the state legislature, so you could see how this could get quite partisan. Okay, so criticisms overall of the Electoral College. It overrepresents less populous states. Most people don't immediately look at the map and think that, but if you are looking at it in depth, there is overrepresentation there. The results don't necessarily reflect the national vote. We have had a number of elections where a candidate wins more votes across the country, but does not win the Electoral College. So that can feel undemocratic too. Because candidates campaign to states and not people, that also does not feel like representative democracy and might make people feel as though that they don't have access to the government and they themselves don't have political efficacy. Too complicated. That is a perfectly valid criticism here, that the process might be arcane, outdated, and overcomplicated, where there might be an easier way to do this. So the possible changes to this system. We already went through one, the district method. The nice thing about the district method is Nebraska and Maine could do this quite easily. It didn't require us to change our Constitution. You keep the Electoral College, so nothing in the Constitution has to be changed. But you provide a way for your state to break up electoral votes to avoid the winner-take-all system. This is a good option on paper. You break up the electoral votes. It's not winner-take-all, but you don't have to go through the almost impossible process of changing the U.S. Constitution. Rather, states can just change their own process. And states do, since elections are state-run, states can decide how to award their electoral votes. Another plan that has been kicked around is the proportional plan. This is where you'd keep the Electoral College, like the district method, but you want to break up the winner-take-all system. So you would allot those electoral votes in proportion to the popular vote. And so if we look at a state like Missouri, which currently has 10 electoral votes, if in Missouri 60% of the population went and voted for the Republican, 40% for the Democrat, we could say, oh, well, your 10 electoral votes can be broken up in that same proportion. 6 electoral votes to the Republican, 4 to the Democrat, and that feels fair. That, like the district method, could be done, and the state would just have to change what it does. The major problem here is that these votes have to be whole numbers to get to the 270, which might not be a big deal. You may go, oh, let's just round it up. That's not a big deal per se in Texas or California, where they have very large electoral votes, but that'd be a huge deal in a state like Montana with 3. They have 3 electoral votes. Imagine 58% of the people of Montana voted for the Republican candidate. How does that translate to awarding 1, 2, or 3 electoral votes? It would greatly exaggerate a win or a loss. Now, some say the winner-take-all already does that, and this would be a way to modify it. But that point of contention leaves this plan almost impossible. Then you have the National Popular Plan. Most Americans, many politicians, love this one. Just a straight national vote. We do the popular vote in every single state quite easily. Let's just do a national popular vote. I would support this one too. If we can vote in American Idol, we have the technology to just count up votes across the country. The main problem that makes this feel so challenging, nearly impossible, is that to do this you would have to abolish the Electoral College, essentially changing this document, rewriting the Constitution. The amendment process requires 38 states to ratify. You need 38 states to agree to change the Constitution. So I want you to think about this topic in particular, the Electoral College. Pause for a minute and give yourself a minute to really think, why haven't we amended the Constitution to abolish the Electoral College? It has been the most proposed amendment in Congress, but never gets to or past the ratification phase. So think for a minute, pause. Okay, I know it's a challenging question. Remember how we said as a criticism, small states are overrepresented? That means small states enjoy the Electoral College. They wield a little more power than they ought to in the Electoral College. And we need 38 states to ratify a change to the document. We did an activity early on in this semester where we looked at how to amend the Constitution, the process for proposing an amendment and ratifying an amendment. In that activity, we also looked at where people live. And even though a majority of people live in the 12 more populous states, those 38 states which enjoy the Electoral College wield great power in the amendment process. So it might not be a it might not be a partisan issue. It might be a big state, small state issue that keeps us from amending the Constitution to move to a national popular plan. All right, and the final detail, a tie. If there's a tie. I guess we could discover that in November, but we also could discover it if there's a faithless elector and we end up with 269 to 269. So that is a possibility. Remember, they're counting the ballots in the House in January. So each state, if they find out that that's 269 to 269, what they do is in the House of Representatives, each state gets 1 vote. Ugh, that's weird. There are 435 people in the House. Each state gets 1 vote. So what they do is they put representatives from each state together and they get to cast 1 vote. So there will be 50 votes in the House. You'd need 26 or more. So that is complicated, and you can even see that there's a possibility for a tie there. There's no backup plan, so House of Representatives needs to work it out. There's no plan for if there's a tie in the House. And where are the ballots for the Vice President counted? Over there in the Senate. Now here it goes back to the normal way of doing things where each person in the Senate gets 1 vote. So here you're going to have all 100 senators getting their own votes. They don't have to form state delegations within. You'll need 51 votes to cast to decide who the next vice president will be. Guess who gets to cast the tie-breaking vote? The current VP. that could be tricky. Okay, that's it.